Hey, welcome back to my program. I'm deeply concerned about some of the voting changes that are taking place in primarily Republican-controlled legislatures all over the country. I was Secretary of State of Louisiana for 8 years. I was the Chief Elections Officer. And I really pushed strongly, lobbied very strongly to do away with this Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act made any change of any kind in a select number of states where you'd have to go to Washington, D.C. to the Justice Department to get approval. And I made any change. If you moved a voting precinct by 100 feet, you had to get that changed. Even the voting machines moved from one room to the other. That all had to be approved by the Justice Department, which is ridiculous. It cost millions of dollars. It was archaic, and they were showing prejudice towards a handful of states, including my home of Louisiana, that had some problems 60 years ago. I understand that. There should have been monitoring 60 years ago, 50 years ago. But not today. The voting irregularities, I hear about so much are in the Midwest and back east, not so much in the South anymore. Well, what's happened now? So anyway, the Supreme Court did away with Voting Rights Act. You don't have to have pre-approval. Well, immediately, not just waiting a few months, but immediately some of these legislators jumped into the fray and put all types of new restrictions on the whole voting process. For example, you had to have a picture ID. Now, I don't have a problem with a picture ID. We do so in Louisiana. You're supposed to show a picture ID. You do for anything else. But, I mean, within days of the Voting Rights Act being overturned, all these new rules went into place. In Ohio, they cut back on the time you could absentee vote. Many states cut back on the voting hours, 2 or 3 hours a day. It used to be from 6 in the morning to 8 at night. They cut it from maybe 8 in the morning to 5 at night. Very limited time when you can go to the polls and vote. And all those changes were looked at, quite frankly, as directed towards blue-collar people, African Americans, those who had to work, maybe weren't available on Election Day, had to work on Election Day and didn't have that window to go vote. So it was very calculated. And I'm not advocating Republican policy or Democratic policy. I'm advocating fairness policy. And I don't think that limiting how much a person can vote is the right thing to do. You know, in Washington now, you can actually vote by mail. Our servicemen and women for years have been able to vote by mail. Never heard of any problems in doing something like that. Nobody's going to go to all the trouble of falsifying documents and going to all the trouble of preparing envelopes for one vote when there are millions of votes that take place. There's just no fraud at that particular level. So I just think that there's been a huge overreaction, and what I'm concerned about is that the federal government is going to step back in. We should run these voting precincts, the whole election process, on a state-by-state basis. I believe in that. That was my process when I ran for Secretary of State. I think that's right. But what we're doing now is we're allowing states to so overreact that you may see Congress give that power back to the federal government. That's wrong. Go ahead and let everybody vote. Fight it out in the election process. But don't restrict certain groups from voting like we're doing right now in Ohio, in Texas, and many other states. I just think that's wrong. We can do a much, much better job.